Hello and good morning. You're very welcome back in the new year, and Happy New Year, and hope you enjoyed your break. And welcome back to the Enterprise University. So what we have today is we're covering everything around banking and how to utilize it better basically within the system and to help you with your day-to-day processes. So as always, if this is your first time to join me, you're very welcome to this lesson. And of course, all lessons will be made available to you once they've been recorded today. And you can find those on our website, which is enterpryze.com. And when you click on resources and the Enterprise University, you will get access to all previous recordings. So without further ado, let me start by sharing with you today's agenda, but also have a look at where we are in terms of the current curriculum and of course where that will lead us to over the coming months as well. So let me start by sharing my presentation with you so that you can see exactly where we stand as of today. So just as a reminder, of course, as always, just to confirm where it is that we stand in relation to the current curriculum. So we obviously are on module 5 of the Enterprise University, so we've hit the halfway point today. So we've covered so far to date CRM and sales, services, purchasing, accounting, and of course today with banking. So there's plenty more to come, and of course in 2 weeks' time we kick off one of 3 lessons around products, around items, around everything relating to stock, how to manage your stock, how to utilize the stock within reports, and how to get the best out of using the grids as well from a reporting perspective. So lots more to come around that. So let me share with you what today's lesson is going to cover. So I'm sure for most of you that are attending this lesson, that banking is not something that's new to you within the system. Perhaps you're only utilizing part of the banking functionality and you want to just maybe refresh your mind on what areas of banking that you could be using and getting more value out of your platform. And perhaps you're using it in one organization and haven't rolled it out yet to another organization. So lots to always learn. And of course, what I try to do with all of these lessons, again, if you're new to the university, is to remind you about all of the new functionality and features that we've brought into this module as we presented as well. And of course, as always, banking in particular is going to come up with a lot of changes throughout in the coming year. In fact, we are looking at refreshing the UI around the banking payments and around the reconciliation and how that all functions and operates for you. So we are looking to make big improvements this year all around the banking functionality. So obviously what we'll do is we'll just look at the banking overview, what it is that you can do within the system. We will then focus in, of course, as always, on those specific areas such as the bank feed. We will look at the bank accounts, so the importance of setting up your bank account and what that means for all the different payment types that you utilize within the system. So how can you add those payments? What kind of payment types can you process within the system? So for example, customers, suppliers, journal payments, SEPA and BACS, credit transfers. We will look at the different bank reconciliations that are available to you currently. So whether you utilize the current bank feed integration or without the bank feed integration, what else can you do to reconcile your bank account? In addition to that, we'll also look at company reconciliation. Again, I always feel that this is something that's underutilized within the system. This is simply a way of clearing down your customer and supplier balances and tidying up those accounts so that when you look at a customer supplier account, for example, you might have a number of invoices or credit notes or payments on the account that you need to reconcile off and clear down the balances. And of course, inevitably, that will just mean a cleaner looking aged receivables and aged payables report as well. So making informed decisions on cash flow and making that easier to identify. We'll also look at the initial settings. So what does that look like? What do you need to have set up in the system in order to be up and running and utilizing fully all the banking functionalities? So payment terms. They're important because, of course, they indicate when invoices are due to be paid, for example. So when you're processing your sales invoices, have you got the right payment terms allocated to your customers, for example? And of course to your suppliers to ensure, again, cash flow purposes. So as those due dates are allocated to those invoices, that when they come up then for the payment run for payment, that you can see when invoices are in fact due for payment. There's also a selection of GL accounts, and they're important because what they do is they indicate the path on the accounting side of where those payments should reside. So what GL accounts on the balance sheet. So for example, the assets, so all the different bank accounts and the different cash accounts that must be in place in order for you to effectively post payments within the system. And of course, exchange rates. So when dealing with foreign currency, it's important that you have the relevant exchange rates defined in the system. You will, of course, notice here we are now already in early January. You've probably landed in the system this week to start processing just general transactions. And you may have already gotten a reminder on the system. You can't add the order or you can't add the invoice because exchange rates don't exist if you're dealing with foreign currency customers or suppliers. And that's important too as well, because when we go to process payments against those foreign currency invoices, what happens on the accounting side from the point of view of exchange gains or losses? So we'll talk about that today as well as part of the lesson, and just indicate to you exactly what happens when you process a payment for a foreign currency supplier or customer, what to expect in terms of gain or loss on the exchange rates. And then last but not least, of course, as always, once we go through all of the different features that are available, we will always go into do a live demonstration. And of course, today I will give you an insight to the bank feed integration and what that could look like for you. Again, if this is something that you haven't yet used, this is an opportunity just to see what information it brings to you on screen. What can you do day to day to maintain the bank feed with the daily bank reconciliations and to make it easier for you to visualize your bank account as it comes through your system. So let's just quickly do a recap on Module 4. So if you weren't present for the last module, as I've said, all recordings are available currently on our website on enterpryze.com under Resources and into Enterprise University. But just a quick reminder, we discussed on the last session there a couple of weeks before Christmas, what is accounting? So we just basically just to demystify for anybody that may have been new to using the accounting module or perhaps wants to start using it themselves. So what is accounting? So of course, effectively accounting is bringing all the areas of the business together to paint the picture of how well your business is doing. That's generally what accounting is doing. So from the point of view of profit and loss, of balance sheet, so where you have made or lost money, or where you have value, for example, in your assets and what that looks like overall. We looked at the chart of accounts, so basically how you define and structure what the accounting module is going to look like. And that's all done through the chart of accounts. And that's really where everything resides in terms of the drawers, where information gets posted to directly and automatically from your transactions on your sales and purchases, and of course from expenses and of course in the banking payments. We looked at the importance of journals, and of course we'll refer to journals again today because of course all transactions, so again I've talked about the banking payments, once you post a banking payment it's going to create a journal entry. So the importance of journals, because this really tells the story of how well the business is doing, the cash flow, and of course from the payments perspective, that's important. Cost accounting and projects, we looked at that overall as to how you could utilize using cost accounting and projects within the system. Setting simple budgets against your GL accounts to control spend. We looked at the initial settings and what you can do in terms of the setup for that. And of course, we looked at the importance of reporting because there's so many variables on the reporting available on the system, such as tax report, profit and loss, balance sheet, trial balance, just to name a few, which would be the standard reports that you would be familiar with. And of course, aged receivables and aged payables, which will become very important, of course, as you're using the banking module and tracking your payments coming in from your customers and tracking your payments going out to your suppliers. So let's refocus and look at today's module all around banking and what the overview involves. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on all the areas that are available to you within the banking module. So starting off here, we have the bank feed. The bank feed is simply where we integrate with a third-party platform to bring in your bank transactions daily from your bank account. So it feeds those transactions into the system. And from there, what you can do is compare, of course, transactions coming in from the bank to transactions that you have currently on the platform, i.e. within Enterpryze, identify any missing transactions, or simply identify daily reconciliations that can be done and make it easy and simple to clear down and match up transactions from one side to the other. And of course, you can add missing transactions. So if, for example, the bank transactions don't yet exist on the Enterpryze side, you could actually add those directly on the day as you're doing the bank feed or doing the bank reconciliation from the bank feed itself. I'll go into that obviously in more detail, in particular around the security and what it is that how we enable the bank feed for you and what that means from a data perspective as well for your system. We will also look at bank accounts and the importance of bank accounts. And of course, you have to have a bank account set up in order to record an incoming or an outgoing payment. It's as simple as that. Bank accounts will be required, and of course they can be linked to your suppliers, which we'll talk about as well in relation to the payment wizard for bulk payments to your suppliers, for example, but they will also be needed to allocate the payment methods as you allocate, for example, an incoming payment to your customer. So lots of things around the bank accounts that you can do as well on the setup. We will look at the different payment types. So I've mentioned already about incoming and outgoing payments. And of course, we have the ability to process the payment wizard for credit transfers. Now we cater for two types or two formats, or two XML formats, which is SEPA and BACS. So BACS is primarily in the UK, but SEPA, of course, is the European-wide credit transfer option that you have available within the payment wizard. But again, we'll go into all of those in greater detail. Then we have the bank reconciliation. Well, what is a bank reconciliation? What does it enable you to do? How can you manage the bank reconciliation? And if I'm not using the bank feed integration, can I still do a bank reconciliation? So the answer to all of this will be confirmed as we go through the module itself. And of course, here's the one I keep talking about, which is the company reconciliations. I've had a lot of conversations with customers over the last couple of months where they're not even aware of the company reconciliations or the benefit of utilizing company reconciliations. So the whole idea here is that you get to clear down your customer and supplier balances and tidy up your aged receivables and aged payables. So if you think about, for example, you might have multiple invoices on an account and maybe have one payment to pay all those invoices. Perhaps the payment came in ahead of all the invoices and the invoices were added later on. Well, now you need to go back and reconcile all of those invoices against that particular payment. You can simply do that in company reconciliations. You can also include credit notes in your company reconciliations. So it just makes it easier to manage and maintain, clear down those accounts and make it all look tidy, as I've said, for your aged receivables and your aged payables. So let's start off with the bank feed itself. And the first thing I want to clarify here in relation to the bank feed. So we integrate with a third party, it's actually Plaid, where it enables us to talk to and communicate with your bank account to bring in your bank feed transactions. At the top of the screen here, I've confirmed for you here exactly what countries we currently deal with in relation to the bank institutions. So bank institutions in the UK, Ireland, US, Canada, and now we've extended that to include the Netherlands, Germany, and France. So that's what we currently have in place. Of course, there is always scope to extend that. So that will be based on requirements going forward from customers where we feel the need to extend into further countries. So it's very simple, of course, when you go into the bank feed, well, how do I know if my bank account is there? You can actually easily find out if your bank account or your bank institute, not your bank account, but your bank institution does exist for the purpose of the integration. Or you can certainly reach out to us to verify before proceeding with the bank feed integration if this is something that's going to suit your organization. So just to confirm what it is that we actually do, so we simply connect to the banks with authentication from your bank institution. So this is not your enterprise authentication, or if this is simply your bank institution authentication, which is something that we don't hold, that we don't capture, that we don't know. So this is only information that you are fully aware of at the time when doing that connection. What we do as part of the bank feed integration, we simply show the daily bank feeds, and the bank balance, of course, will be displayed on the dashboard itself. So when you land into banking, you have a whole banking dashboard, which you can see there coming up on the left-hand side. The first part will show all the bank feed transactions. So as they come in day to day, those transactions will appear on the bank feed. And then in the middle of the screen under the bank balance, you will be able to see the bank institution balance as it's updated on a daily basis. It's important to note that, when doing a bank feed for the very first time, and again, this would be something that you would discuss in the outset with either support, but primarily probably with your lead consultant on the platform, to ensure that you started off at a time when perhaps maybe at the beginning of a month and you've just done a final bank reconciliation and you just want to start off at the start of a particular month, for example. It will show pending transactions as well. So if you think about this is primarily on the UK and Ireland, when you log into your own bank account and you always have two tabs, and one of them, of course, is the pending transactions. And this is generally something that is pending, hasn't yet hit the bank account. And it could be retail, it could be just you've walked into the garage today, bought a bit of petrol, and you'll see it that it hasn't been taken out of the bank yet, but it will be generally within 24 hours. So even on the bank feed itself, we can show those pending transactions. And purely all that is visibility. It's giving you similar visibility as to what you see on your actual bank account to identify that there are expected transactions yet to come through on the bank feed itself. So we can show those pending transactions. You can't actually reconcile them until they're realized transactions, but at least you have the added benefit of actually visualizing what transactions are yet to come through your bank account. You can do daily bank reconciliations. So this is really something that we would recommend when you're using the bank feed integration. Why wait till the end of the month, or why wait till the end of the week, particularly if you're dealing with large volumes of transactions? Do those bank reconciliations if you can, and if it suits the business process, do those on a daily basis. You simply go in and match the bank feed transaction with the system transactions that exist already on the enterprise system. So if this is something that is you're able to utilize on a daily basis, I would recommend that's something that you do. Again, it just reduces the volume, saves time at the end of the week or the end of the month in trying to bulk reconcile all of the different transactions. Again, all down to process and all down to the volume that you need to cater for on your system. And of course, what's important to note here is that we can also do auto matching. So auto matching is something that we enable you to do on the bank reconciliation screen. The idea around auto matching is that if you, for example, again, today is the 7th of January, and you've got a bank feed transaction coming in today, the 7th of January, but you processed the incoming payment, let's say on Enterprise yesterday, on the 6th of January, auto matching can then, if you select the auto matching button, it can then go looking for payments within 3 days, usually within a 3-day onset, and of the same value and customer references to auto-match those values automatically for you. I'll show you an example of that today, just on the demonstration of what I mean by that. If it's outside of the parameters, so for example, if the payment on Enterprise was added a month ago, and the bank fee transaction has only come through today, it's not going to be able to auto-match because in terms of the date parameters, it's out of sync. However, you'll still be able to search for the amount or search for the reference and of course, simply and easily match those up during the bank reconciliation. So moving on, this is all around the data itself. This is important to know because, of course, these are questions that constantly come up around, well, if I start using the bank feed integration, will my data be secure? What is it? How do we handle the data security? Well, first and foremost, because obviously this is a bank feed integration and we're integrating with a third-party add-on. So this is primarily authorized by the Financial Conduct Authority. So this is fully covered in terms of financial data flowing to and from your system. There are terms and conditions which you can clearly read before you agree to uploading your data. So data is only shared with your consent. That's the part I've mentioned there about the terms and conditions. It's secure on the cloud. The connection is only made with your bank credentials. So that's an important step to note that you have to use your bank institution or your online banking credentials. We don't know those. We don't store those. We don't own those. And more importantly, neither does the third party where the data is being passed through. So they don't hold your credentials. That's all in relation to your bank institution. So this is another security check. So you have to re-authenticate every 90 days. And this is all part of the FCA's requirements. So if, for example, you're using the bank feed integration and you've gone past the 90 days, you'll see that the status will change on the bank feed integration and it will drop off until you re-authenticate. And that is really a safety net and a security check to ensure, number one, that you're still using it and you still want data to be coming through the system. Number two, if for any reason that your login has changed and you've reset your login with your bank institute, you can re-authenticate. So of course you can re-authenticate at any time and stop and re-authenticate and update that login as and when you require it as well before the 90 days. But that's important to note that it is all security bound and that we look to update that information on a regular basis. And more importantly, Enterprise does not store your bank credentials. Absolutely not. We don't know what they are. Only you know what they are. I know with some bank institutions, even when you're doing the bank feed integration to begin with, sometimes it doesn't work the first time. And that's generally down to your bank institution and their extra security checks. And generally, once you contact your bank institution and tell them exactly what it is you're trying to do, they will enable the feed then to happen on their end from a security perspective. So moving on then in terms of the bank accounts. So just to go back a step as to adding a bank account, because a bank account has to exist in order to be able to connect it up to the bank feed on Enterprise. So your bank accounts are required, of course, for all payments. So whether that's incoming, outgoing, journal payments, SEPA, BACS, credit transfer, whatever those payments are, you still have to have a bank account. If you're going to utilize the bank feed, you have to have the bank account. So simply all we're doing here on the account screen is you can add a bank account here. So when you click on add bank account, you can define the different bank accounts that you require. Up the top there, you can see there is a box highlighted, which is called linked institution. So that will become relevant where you are linking it up to a bank feed institution. So where you've connected a bank feed institution, it will automatically come in here during the process of doing the bank feed integration to link up your institution on this particular screen. So you can see there, you've literally got a bank account name, branch, account number, all of the standard information, currency, and of course, more importantly, down the bottom there, you have the system account, which is your GL account or your cash account that defines where that resides on your balance sheet. So within your assets, where that bank account resides. So let's look at all the different payment types that you can utilize within the system. So starting off with incoming, I think that speaks for itself. So incoming are payments coming in from your customers, and incoming payments can also be used, the same screen can be used for refunds from your supplier. We also have outgoing payments to your suppliers, and on the same screen, you can process a refund to your customers. We have journal payments. So journal payments are simply payments made between GL accounts. So a good example of that, of course, is bank charges. And a journal payment can either be incoming or outgoing, i.e. into the bank or out of the bank. So there's always, the bank account is always involved, and of course whatever other GL accounts that you specify. A journal payment can have multiple lines as well, but it's GL account to GL account when utilising the journal payments option. And of course we have the batch payments, or the payment wizard, as you've seen it probably on the banking menu. So this enables you to process payments in bulk. Now I've mentioned here about SEPA and BACS, so credit transfers for your suppliers. But not only that, batch payments can be utilised for all suppliers. So it might be that you're dealing with a large volume of suppliers and perhaps don't use SEPA and BACS at all. But how do you process payments in bulk for those suppliers? Very simply, use the payment wizard for that purpose as well. So they don't have to have a bank account, and you can process payments in bulk for large volumes of suppliers outside of creating bank files. So it can be utilised for both ways. And that, I think, again, is something that might be perhaps you're underutilising within the system, and you could identify as that's maybe something new to use as a standard process going forward for this year. So let's have a look at what an incoming payment is. So very simply, it's how you record a payment from your customer. Very simply, when processing that payment, you will be able to select the payments to pay or to pay on account. You choose how to pay, so the different payment types, which you can see here on the right-hand side, the transfer, cash, check, split payment, or Stripe. We don't actually have MasterCard activated. The payment defaults to customer. However, you can also process an incoming payment for supplier, which I mentioned as well, when receiving a refund or as a journal entry. So you'll see 3 dial options across the top of your screen when processing an incoming payment. So you can choose whether that's for customer, a refund from a supplier, or a journal payment. So if it's a journal payment on an incoming screen, that means money coming into the bank. So where is it coming from? Maybe it's a refund for bank charges or something like that, for example. Could be an example of a journal payment in the incoming payment screen. Outgoing payment screen is simply just the opposite. This is recording a payment to your supplier. So again, you'll be able to select the invoices to pay or pay in account. One thing I should mention about both the incoming and the outgoing payments, and it aligns to what you can do on the company reconciliation screen as well, that if you get to process a payment and you come in, for example, to the payment screen, and maybe for a particular customer, there might be a couple of invoices, but perhaps there's a credit note as well on the payment screen. You can include that credit note to reduce the payment amount, for example. So you could actually allocate it at that point in time as well on the incoming or outgoing payment screen. So you don't necessarily have to wait to the company reconciliation to process it later. And of course, as always, you can select the payment method. The payment, as I've mentioned, defaults to supplier. However, you can process an outgoing payment for a customer, so whether it's a refund to a customer or as a journal entry. So the good example there is for paying bank charges, for example. There's other options as well that are on screen. There are write-off options as well. So, if you have a nominal amount, for example, if you're processing an incoming payment and maybe somebody has over or underpaid you, and maybe it's only a very small amount, there is a tick box to write off those amounts. So do be aware of the functionality that is there on screen. Perhaps you haven't noticed, perhaps you haven't seen that. So in particular, when it comes to writing off amounts directly on the payment screen, that you can handle it directly from there. And I'm talking about nominal amounts, quite small amounts that you might want to just post off to a bank charges or a bank difference account or whatever you have defined as part of your GL account settings for your payments. And then, of course, we come to the journal payment itself. So it's simply a payment made between two or more GL accounts. One, of course, the primary GL is always the bank account. So whether you process the journal payment on the incoming or the outgoing screen, it's always first and foremost to the bank account that you choose, and then one other or more other GL accounts that you need to split that payment from. So payments can contain more than one line. And of course, the primary example is the bank charges that we've mentioned already. They will also appear, journal payments will appear on your bank reconciliation. So that's important. They're the same as any other payment. They will appear for reconciliation purposes. And you simply you can see here at the top of an outgoing payment screen, there's the three dials that I mentioned. So is my outgoing payment to a customer, or it'll default, of course, to supplier, or do I want to select that as a journal payment? Okay. Batch payments. So this is where you can pay your suppliers in bulk. So a great example of this is if you want to pay all suppliers in bulk and they don't necessarily have a bank account and you just want to be able to quickly process payments in one fell swoop, then utilize the payment wizard for this function. So this is applicable to all suppliers. So whether or not they have a bank account, you can assign references at header level. So these would be the standard references that you would normally enter if you were to do a manual. So if you were to do an incoming or outgoing payment, when you look at the incoming and outgoing payment screen, if you're familiar with those screens, you already have at the top of that screen, when you select your customer or supplier, you have a few reference fields. So you have reference 1, reference 2. You also have a journal remarks. So if you want those to be consistent, even when you're doing a batch payment, you can assign those same references at header level. So if you're doing a bulk payment, they'll obviously, all of the payments involved in that particular payment run will receive the same references or journal remarks that you've decided at that point in time. But it just gives consistency to the type of references that you need to have for audit purposes, for example. And of course, that implicates both on your banking module, but also when it comes through to accounting. And when you're looking back on the journals that have been created, if there's certain references that you need to report on or refer to, that you have those in place as well coming from the payment wizard. You can apply cost centers or projects. You can apply settlement discounts by discount or amount. So this is important. So somebody pays early or you have an agreement with a particular supplier, that you can apply those discounts at the time of doing the payment run. And of course, more importantly, you can select the invoice to pay and of course the specific amounts. Or you can just select the specific suppliers if you're just going to do, if it's an easy process and if it's a process of it's consistent. If you've selected a particular supplier group, for example, as part of your filter on the header level, and you know, for example, that particular group always have one invoice a month, you could select all suppliers and just do the payment run, and then it makes it simple. Otherwise, you can expand the lines, go into each supplier and decide which invoices are going to get paid as part of that run at the time. So lots of different options, something I would certainly look into in greater detail. And of course, as part of the payment run is the SEPA and BACS payments. So this is where we enable you to create batch payments for suppliers that have a defined bank account against those suppliers. So this is where you're creating a bank file. That bank file is an XML bank file that creates a file into your specified folder. And of course, you take that then and upload that online to your online banking. So the two formats we have is SEPA and BACS, as I've mentioned from the very outset. So you very simply define when you're setting up your bank accounts, and that's done through the settings module in finance and banking. You will see a tick box at the point of setting up the bank account where you can specify if it's applicable to SEPA or BACS payments. So this is only for bank transfers as a payment option. You simply add your supplier bank account details in the supplier account under details, under their company details. Okay, so when you're defining your supplier details, you go into their banking, into their finance and tax tab then to update their bank account details. So the great thing here is that you can select the filters. So there's different filters that you can activate on the payment wizard. So by accounts that are overdue, by supplier group, or only suppliers with bank accounts. So it might suit you from a process point of view to do, if for example you're using credit transfer, to do 2 payment runs, to do one that doesn't apply to suppliers that have a bank account, and another payment run that applies to suppliers that do have a bank account. So you could decide that, of course, as part of your filter and as part of your run if you want to keep the 2 of those separate. I would suggest, of course, as always, it's 1 bank account at a time. You're not obviously processing payments from multiple bank accounts. I would also recommend where you are dealing with multiple currencies. So where you have foreign currency banking, I would suggest that you process payments for one currency at a time. So for example, if you're sterling, that you activate your euro payment run, for example, or vice versa. If your organization is euro and you've got a sterling payment run to do, that you activate the sterling payment run separately. And that's simply done on the column filters itself within the payment wizard screen, where you can just change the currency to sterling. And then you only see the suppliers that are sterling or only see the suppliers that are euro, for example. And of course, there at the bottom of the screen, you can see that you can select the relevant invoices to pay and the amounts, of course, as well, that you have control over those. So just a little quick demonstration here on the payment wizard itself. You can see here when you activate the payment wizard screen itself, the first thing you can do is select the bank account. So that's the very first thing you can do here at the top of the screen. It will show you the running amounts for that particular bank account. And of course, as you select payments to be processed, the selected amount for payment will of course increase with that. The other header filters, of course, are that you can select the group. You can also select the balance level. So this is the one I mentioned on the previous slide, where you can, for example, show only invoices that are due for payment. So based on due date, you can look at only invoices that are due for payment currently as of today, or only show suppliers with bank accounts. And of course, if you untick that, it will show all of them. So you'll see all suppliers, regardless of with or without a bank account. So you just have to be aware of what those options are at the time when you go to run the payment wizard, because it makes it really, really simple. And of course, then when you're selecting your invoices, it's simply just a matter of expanding the line on the supplier and ticking those invoices that you need to select and updating those amounts. If there's nothing else to be done, you can simply process the payments at the top of the screen. And of course, for bank accounts that are SEPA or BACS and that have a bank account, an export bank file is created in XML format, and that's ready then for you to send to your banking online for processing. And of course, that's manual. You have to go into your bank online and select that file and upload it. So of course, what's important here is that all selected invoices will create a corresponding payment in Enterpryze and will be automatically closed, i.e. reconciled. There's a settlement discount option, of course, where you can simply click on the discount button to activate against that supplier and apply the discount from your supplier. So for example, if you'd selected a number of payments for this particular supplier, I could then click on the discount button here, which is just on the supplier line. And then on the right-hand side, when that WISE panel appears, I can then define what that discount is going to look like. So for example, if it's a discount percentage or if it's a discount amount, and it will show you the discount that will be applied or allocated then to the full amount of the invoices and close them. So it'll be posted then to the GL account that you define in settings. So we do have a discount account that you can define against your finance and banking GL accounts. So that's important to know that that's where the settlement discount is going to then reside on the journal entries in the accounting module. So how do you then identify those batch payments? So now I've processed batch payments. How do I identify those batch payments? perhaps what's happened is I've processed a batch payment, and in fact, the bank have come back and said, no, we can't accept that payment from that particular supplier. There's insufficient funds. You need to resubmit the file excluding that particular payment, or perhaps you've included a supplier you shouldn't have at that point in time. What can you do? What are the next steps that you can do to rectify that or to update that? So what we've done here is on your outgoing payment screen, we've introduced this new column, and this is called the payment run. So you can get this very simply by going into your elliptical menu and into your column chooser and drag and drop this column into your outgoing payments grid, so the payment run. So what the payment run will do, if you click into the payment run itself, you will then get this WISE panel. And what it does is it identifies for you what the contents are, so i.e. what suppliers got paid. And if you want to quickly look at who they are, you can simply run the payment run contents. Can you see it there in the middle of the screen? So payment run contents. If you run that, that will export a file to Excel, and then you can see a list of all of the payments that have been made and those that relate to bank accounts, for example. So you can identify the specific payment. And of course, very simply then, you can, on the outgoing payments grid, you can right-click very quickly and easily. You'll see that also on the tips and tricks. Right-click and cancel that payment, or drill in directly to that payment, review it, and then cancel it. So what happens if you do cancel it? Well, very simply, you can run this again to exclude it in the bank file. So what you can do is click into the payment run number again, and can you see where you have save and cancel? If you click on save, it will now regenerate that XML file, excluding that cancelled payment. So you have a way back to identify and revise a payment file before it gets uploaded to your bank if you need to remove a payment from that. If it's a case of adding a new payment, no, you'd probably have to cancel all payments if you want to generate a whole new run with an additional payment added to that. That's completely different again. So just to show you some tips and tricks around all of this, because of course, when you're on the grids, is there a quick way, an easier way of identifying, or perhaps maybe cancelling or downloading a payment to see exactly what it looks or what it contains, or generating remittance advice, for example? So yes is the answer to all of the above. So for example, when you're in an incoming or outgoing payment, don't forget you always have an actions button, and the actions button you can see throughout all of your different transactions on the platform. So when you click on the actions button, what can you do? You can send or print a report or download PDF or cancel the document. And of course, send is where you want to maybe send a remittance advice to your supplier, or perhaps you want to print the remittance advice or simply download it for record purposes. So that's a good example, particularly on your outgoing payments. On the incoming payment side, we also have a payments report, which simply just identifies, again, there's filters here that you can run to generate a list of all the incoming payments that have been processed. Now, of course, you can do all of this directly from the grid itself. Don't forget that throughout all of the grids, we have the grid filter. So this is where you can create your own reports using the filtered reports option. So create those reports, save them, make them important to you that you use perhaps on a daily or a weekly basis. So they can be done, of course, on your incoming and outgoing payments. And of course, as always, we do have a right-click option on your grid. So on your incoming and outgoing payments, if you right-click on an incoming or outgoing payment, you should see, if it hasn't already been cancelled, you should see an option where you can cancel that payment directly from the grid, or simply download the PDF, again, for record purposes. So just some tips and tricks of things that you can use already directly from the grids itself. Just to give you an overview, because I've mentioned all the way from the very start that as you process a payment and the journals associated with those payments are automatic. So everything hits back directly to the accounting function or the journals. So this brings us back to module 4. What are the effects of adding a payment on the system? Well, let me just enlighten you here and just to give you a quick overview of what actually happens from an accounting perspective. So for an incoming payment, for example, the normal process is that it will debit the bank and credit the customer, which is basically your receivables. So that would be your aged receivables in the balance sheet. Outgoing payment, the opposite, of course, credits the bank and debits the supplier. or the payables in the balance sheet. SEPA credit transfer, this is your SEPA or your backs, of course, because they're the same as an outgoing payment. They perform the same function as an outgoing payment. They credit the bank, so it's money out of the bank, and debits the supplier or the payables within the balance sheet. And then a journal payment. Well, of course, this could have two sides. And of course, the other side of the incoming and outgoing payment, if I was doing an incoming payment to a supplier, so receiving a refund from my supplier, of course, if I'm going to receive, it's going to credit the supplier and debit the bank. So I've still got money coming in, so it still performs the same function in that regard, except the credit would be on the supplier account. The journal payment, of course, depending on which screen I'm on, if it's an outgoing journal payment, again, you can see there very simply, it follows the same sequence as it does on the outgoing payment itself, credits the bank and debits the chosen GL account. The example, of course, being bank charges. And of course, if it's an incoming journal payment, it debits the bank and credits the chosen GL. So just to give you an overview there, because of course, all of these journals are automated and will automatically happen as a result of those transactions being processed. So let's have a quick look at what the reconciliation can do. So for example, when we're doing a bank reconciliation, we can do that directly from the bank feed, which I've mentioned already. So we can do that daily and match up the transactions. Or alternatively, there is a bank reconciliation option available for bank accounts where you can match up, for example, to your statement. We are making improvements around all of this functionality this year. So bear with us as we look to, particularly around the bank reconciliation, and improve how this works for you as well. So from the bank feed itself, you match your live bank transactions with transactions added to Enterpryze. You've got your bank transactions on the left, your Enterpryze transactions on the right, and you simply choose to reconcile the two of those. Also allows you to identify any missing transactions, such as bank charges or specific payments, etc. You can add any missing transactions or any payments from here. Now that could be a bank transaction itself, which is something that we introduced last year, which you may not be aware of because it is permission-based. And you can also add system transactions, which is Enterpryze transactions directly from that screen. We will also look to improve those transactions, what you actually see when you go to add those payments. We'll be looking to improve those this year for you as well. You can access the bank reconciliation directly from the dashboard or on the Accounts tab. And then for other bank accounts, this is it here. All you have is, your statement end balance. You've got the end date, you've got your statement number, and all you're doing is simply just selecting or ticking off transactions that are required to be reconciled. We will look to improve this and make this better to work and align with your bank statement better this year as well. All transactions from Enterpryze will be displayed. You won't see anything from your actual bank account. You can, of course, add any missing payments as well from there as you go through. And of course, then the company reconciliation. We've talked about this, matching up the outstanding transactions on your customer and supplier to clear them down. So for example, any open invoices, credit notes, payments. So maybe you had multiple payments on account. How do I clear those down and make that look clean on my aged receivables? So you can do all of this through the company reconciliation screen. So I've mentioned there already about the credit notes, and it keeps it clean on the aging report. So what does this look like? So in the banking module, you have a company reconciliation option. You will only see this if you have permission to use the bank reconciliation function within Enterpryze. And then through here, you can select your customer or supplier. So you can see here on the company, select your customer supplier, and then simply go and tick off the transactions that you wish to pay, but you can also update the amounts to reconcile as well on the column here. So just another great way of clearing down those reports. So we have another option here as well when it comes to reporting, which is your bank reconciliation report. So you can access this directly from the bank reconciliation screen. You will see there the blue button for report. And what this will do is you can enter the date and click on generate. This will just show you basically your bank reconciliation. So where in terms of any reconciled balance to date, balance as per the statement, just what's been reconciled to date in terms of your bank reconciliation, and just to give you a better overview of what's currently outstanding and waiting to be reconciled as well. So it's a handy one maybe to run perhaps at the end of a week when you've gone through a number of reconciliations. And of course, as always, before you get up and running on banking, what is it that I need? And we mentioned already about the payment terms. So what terms need to be in place in order for your customers and suppliers to have the correct due dates applied to their invoices? So that's your payment terms. Your GL accounts, and of course your exchange rates. So this is something that, exchange rates in particular, are something that you can maintain daily, weekly, monthly, whatever is your requirement, and in line with whatever you've agreed with the bank as well, because that's important. So the initial setup is here. You go into settings, you go into finance and banking, and you have your payment terms. So what will be assigned then to your customers and suppliers. So this is something that we would have looked at as well as part of the sales and CRM, because of course this is going to influence the due dates on all of your invoices for sales and for purchasing as well. Payment GL accounts. So these are important. This is where you define the default GL accounts to be used when making, number one, incoming payments, receipts. You've got the transfer account, the cash account, the write-off account for VAT, the write-off account here, outgoing payments, transfer account, cash, discount account. I mentioned already about the settlement discount. This is the account that you will need to have in place in order for that discount or settlement discount to be recorded. And then default bank charges account. That's important because as part of the bank reconciliation, you can write off differences to bank charges. So if you want that to happen automatically, you need to have a GL account set up for that purpose as well. Exchange rates. So these are something that you can maintain daily, weekly, monthly, whatever your process is. You actually have a manage currencies option available to you in the banking module. Again, it's all down to permissions, what you have permissions to. So when you go to manage currencies, you can see here that you can basically specify, set the month and the year. And then of course, for each currency, you can define what rates are going to be set and the timeline for those rates. And of course, individual rates can then be changed on a daily basis if and when you need them. So it's not necessarily set in stone. Okay. How does it work then in terms of the exchange gain or loss? So if, for example, I add payment for a foreign exchange customer supplier, what happens? So Enterpryze will take care of the realized gain or loss financial posting once it is reconciled against an invoice. So this looks at the exchange rate used on the invoice versus the exchange rate used on the payment. And of course, if there's no difference, there is no gain or loss posting. So let me give you an example, a demonstration of what I mean by that. So here we have, for example, an invoice that was added for a sterling customer at an exchange rate of 0.88 euro. The figure that I want you to focus in on is the first line, which is the aged receivables, which is the impact on the customer balance of 1845 euro. You can see there that the FC amount, 2096 GBP, is there also. So they're the two amounts I want you to focus on. So what happens next? If I then enter a payment against the same invoice at an exchange rate of 0.92 euro, can you see straight away the difference of what has happened? So the impact on the bank when that particular amount is paid, you can see there that the exchange rate then converts that to 1928.87 on the exchange rate. So, and you can see there as well that, okay, it updates which is basically what we see there, the difference between what was outstanding on this customer account, which was 1845. So the difference between the two exchange rates is 83.87 euro. So now that's going to impact my currency gain or loss account at this point in time. So now it's been realized at the time of payment because I've allocated it to that invoice. This is the impact to my currency gain or loss account on the balance sheet. So next up then we have, if we look here now and just do a quick demonstration on the bank feed integration. So what I'll do here, if we jump straight into the live system, let me just share my screen with you now. And just to give you a quick review of what this all looks like. So if we, okay, let me just share the screen with you. Perfect. Okay, so now you're looking at my system here. So this, just to mention, of course, this, of course, is a test system. It's a sandbox. So I can't do a true live integration for you, but I want to give you a sense of what the integration piece can look like and what you should expect or could expect to see on screen. So starting here in the banking module, here we have the dashboard. And as you can see here, it clearly defines under the banking dashboard the bank transactions feed. So these are simply all the transactions coming in from your bank feed. And this could be obviously as of today. You can see there we've got a transaction from last year. We've currently got nothing for this year coming in. But just to show you that this is what it looks like. Even at a glance, even color-wise, visual-wise, I can see the greens are the incoming payments. The reds here or the pinks are the outgoing payments. So I can clearly even identify just by looking at this that I can see there's payments coming in. You'll also notice that some of them have in brackets where you have pending. So where it's a pending transaction, I can identify the pending transactions that's still waiting to hit the bank account at this point in time. You will see here on the line for the pending transaction, I can see, of course, the account, which is my bank account, so your bank account number. I don't have a reconcile button because that's important. I did mention that you can't reconcile a pending transaction. But if you look to the other bank accounts, you can see a reconcile button against those values. So I can simply go in now and reconcile that if I wish and go into the reconciliation screen. In the middle of the screen here under the bank balance, I just wanted to show you this. We have system balance versus bank balance. System balance, of course, is your enterprise, and bank balance is what's coming through on the bank feed. Now, if I have multiple bank accounts, I will see the different balances listed here. Some of them you can see here don't have a bank feed integration, such as petty cash, and a couple of the other ones at the bottom here. But my current accounts and deposit account do have a bank feed integration listed. So if I then go into the accounts module, so if I start from here, first thing I notice here is that I have a list of all my different bank accounts listed. I can clearly see those that have previously been linked up to the bank feed. And where I can see that and identify that here is on the bank feed column. So you can see here under feed, I can see here when the last transaction was last received. I can see here that it might require reauthentication. So this is where I've mentioned from a data security perspective, when your bank might require reauthentication to ensure that the credentials are up to date and secure for your bank institution. So that's where you can simply click on the red button here, and then you continue through and reauthenticate that particular bank institution again directly from here. It also shows me what transactions are unreconciled. So I have an idea before I even go in at the start of the week, for example, or the start of the day, that I've now got 10 transactions or 61 or 3 or 5, whatever the case may be, to reconcile. So what happens with the bank connection? If I wanted to identify that my bank institution actually exists before I even go in to do an integration, I can simply click here on Connect Bank Feed. You can see here, these are part of the terms and conditions. You can see here, there's links there to go off to the Financial Conduct Authority that I've mentioned to you already. So it's completely covered under the Payment Services Regulations. If I agreed and proceed, I'm still not doing anything. I'm just coming in to take a look. It will tell me here on the drop downs what kind of data that it looks for and that it reads in. It includes the amounts, the date, the type, and a description of the transaction. So basic payment information. Account details includes the account name, the type, the account number, sort code, and balance, because it has to be able to match those up with what you already have within the system. And then if I continue on, this is where I get a list of all the institutions. So from here, you can do a search for your bank institution and take a look to see, does your bank institution exist? And I would always, do a quick check and make sure that in terms of the integration with Plaid, we can also do a verified check for you to make sure that there are no known delays with getting an institution connected up for you, or what you need to do to ensure that that's connected up smoothly for you. But usually it's quite quick on the day. And if there are, as I've said, any delays, it generally tends to be on the bank institution side, where the bank institution will put a block on you connecting in the first place, and you might have to reach out to them and say, look, I'm doing this connection. Are we okay to proceed? And take it from there. So you can type in whatever bank account that you need. So for example, again, just taking one obviously at the top of my head. So look, there's Bank of America, Bank of Ireland, for example. So whether it's personal or whether it's business. So don't forget, institutions also have multiple bank account types. So there might be, for example, 365 online for personal, but business online. So you have to make sure you've picked the right bank account type as well when making that connection. So just to give you an idea there of what it looks like when you are bringing in the connection for the very first time. And of course, when a bank account is connected, if you remember, we saw where you could review a bank account and of course link it up to the relevant institution, which is done here. So when adding a bank account for the very first time, this screen will automatically open, and then you very simply select the institution. And this is the linked institution that you've now just connected with through the integration piece, and then link it up to your actual bank account in Enterprise and bring it through. So what does it look like then from a reconciliation perspective? So when you then go to reconcile, and as you can see, you've got already, you come in here to reconcile. You have a list of the bank accounts available. I clicked on reconciliation against the first one, but I could switch to another one from here as well. We have a list of all the bank transactions on the left, Enterprise transactions on the right. There's lots of things that you can do here. So I can view pending transactions. So if you want to see what transactions are in fact pending, so I can just bring that up to date. You can, whether or not you see those on screen at the time, you can tick this box. You have an auto post differences to bank charges, which I mentioned as part of your GL account determination, that if there is a difference on the reconciliation, that you can auto post differences to bank charges. We've also introduced this new functionality here on the screen, which is on the bank transaction side. And again, this is all around user permissions. So it's a user permission that has to be switched on if for any reason. And this could be where there is an actual missing bank transaction and the bank feed has gone in. Perhaps it was a timing delay. You instigated the bank feed yesterday, but meant to do it the day before, and now you have all the bank transactions from the day before are missing. We can't kickstart it again, but what you can do is you can click on New here and bring in or type in very simply with the wizard here those missing payments, and it simply is a date, description, a reference, and a value. It's nice and simple, and it enables you then to have that bank transaction here on the left-hand side. This is permission-based, so it's not something you are going to want all users who are even using banking to be able to do. So I would, identify that as something only on a need-to-know basis or a need-to-do basis, I guess, as well. And of course, you can search within the grid if you've got multiple payments. You can search for the value. The same on the right-hand side from the Enterprise side, you can search for the value. There's actions here where you can reset, particularly if you've done any filters. So let's say, for example, if you're looking at a particular date and you've filtered out the columns, you can reset those as well. So I've mentioned already about the auto matching. Let's take a look at what the auto matching actually does. So auto matching. So here's a good example. Here we have, if you can see, now I know the dates run back a few years, but just to give you an idea, we have a payment on the left-hand side come in from the bank feed on the 6th of March, but we also have the same payment on the Enterprise side on the 5th of March. So it's still within that few days, within that 3 to 4 day range. So it was able to identify a match based on the date range, the business partner, but primarily on the amount as well. So it's looking at the date and the value, and it's automatically been able to match those amounts. This would be a great thing, obviously, when you're processing daily bank reconciliations to very quickly match those amounts up and use the auto matching for that purpose. Otherwise, you can simply just manually select the payments and tick them off as you go, or search for the amounts or search for the business partner, whatever way makes it easier for you to utilize it. So how can I follow that through? Well, what I can do there is I can click on Match Selected. So this has brought me back to the unmatched transactions. I can then look at the matched transactions, which are these ones here. So that's what this button here on the right, if you're wondering what this means, this button here on the right allows you to see the grid and the view that you need to see it. Do you see it as all transactions, matched transactions only, or unmatched transactions? Maybe you have more matching to do. If I'm looking at the matched transactions, well, if there was a few matched, can I actually cancel? Yes, you can. Unmatched, selected, and that's it. Then I can simply go back if I wanted to again to do my auto matching. And if I decide to proceed, I can then click on Finish Now. And then that will just complete the reconciliation, which is just those two transactions. Obviously, there's not very much involved there. And you can see there on the reconciliation is done now with the two transactions, but I still have a way back. I can cancel that reconciliation if I want to place them both back on the respective sides of the reconciliation screen. Perhaps I needed to wait for another payment, or perhaps it was the wrong customer. For example, same amount, wrong customer, could easily happen. So just to allow for those different eventualities as they occur on the system. So lots to take a look at in relation to the banking. And as I said, these are things that, to make yourself fully aware of that you could utilize within the system. And, even on the BankRec side of things as well, this is where, so for example, if I wanted to reconcile a non-bank feed transaction, so you can see here, if I click on reconciliation at this point, because it's not linked to a bank feed, the screen is entirely different. I can link up an attachment to it just to save, for example, a copy of the statement, but it's simply just a tick box selection here. And of course, it's a matter of putting in the statement number, the end date, and the end balance. We are looking at improving this screen as the year goes on this year, so do watch out for all future UI enhancements as they come through the system. I'm just going to quickly check, because I realise we've completely run over time, and I appreciate you staying on so long, just to see if there's any questions that you may have around banking. And of course, as always, check out the Help Centre, help.enterpryze.com. Keep an eye on all of the changes that are coming as well on the roadmap. That's an important stopgap for you as well. So for example, if we go into enterpryze.com, and again, if you go into resources, just let me load this up on screen. It's a little bit slow. Wait for that to come up. Okay, and then click on resources here. So if you want to keep abreast of what's actually coming through on the system and what you can look forward to happening live on the system for this year, for example, come in here to resources, go into roadmap, and keep up to date on all the latest functions and features that could bring you value this year in particular. You can view the recent releases, so you can look back on what we've obviously previously released and any of the webinars, but more importantly, you can see what's coming soon, what's going to be changing on accounting. For example, here we go, look, accounting and banking. There is a new UI coming, I've mentioned it already, for incoming and outgoing payments. No timeline on it just yet, but they are coming. There's lots of changes around e-invoicing. We've got the deferrer, which I think we would have mentioned as part of the accounting module as well. We've got intercompany month end, year end. So lots to come on the roadmap. So do check those out. So let me just quickly check to see if we have any Q&A coming through. We've nothing coming through, guys. So I appreciate you staying over the time and taking the time out on probably your first week back after the long break. So I wish you well in your enterprise journey, and do reach out if you have any further questions and need to check out anything further on the system, do reach out to us. And of course, as always, this leads us on, of course, to the next module, which will be a full recap of what we've done today and everything item-based. So lots of detailed looks at the different item types, setting up perpetual inventory, enterprise for stock groups, prices, warehouses, and lots more. Margin calculations, bill of materials, batch items. So lots to cover again on the next module. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today and staying on board and taking the time out. And I certainly look forward to seeing you on the next lesson. Thanks and take care.